Picture this. You're standing in the middle of your own shop, the place you built with your own two hands, and the man who once promised to marry you walks through the door with another woman on his arm, and instead of leaving you alone, he actually stops. He wants an audience. He wants everyone to watch him tell you that he traded up. Now imagine that in the very same breath, a stranger you barely know steps forward, lifts your chin, and kisses you in front of the entire room. That's exactly where our story begins. And trust me, you're going to want to stick around for how it ends. Beatrice Holloway had been having a completely ordinary day. She'd baked a lemon tart that morning that she was genuinely proud of. The little dessert studio smelled like warm butter and vanilla, the way it always did. Customers were chatting, sipping coffee, browsing the display case. And then the bell above the door chimed and everything froze. Nolan walked in like he owned the place, and draped on his arm was Vanessa, elegant, polished, smiling the kind of smile that has a knife hidden inside it. "Say, congratulations," Nolan announced to the whole room, loud enough that every single customer turned to look. "To the woman I chose instead of you." Let that sink in for a second. This man didn't just move on. He came back specifically to make sure Beatrice knew she'd been replaced, and he wanted witnesses. Vanessa twisted the knife a little deeper. "You should thank me," she said sweetly. "If she hadn't settled for being so ordinary, I never would have found such a successful man." The shop went dead silent. Nobody looked away. Nobody knew what to do. And Beatrice? She did the only thing she could think of. She forced a smile onto her face, refusing to let them see her fall apart. She would not give them the satisfaction of tears. And then a calm voice cut to the whole thing. "That's enough." A tall man stepped forward from the edge of the room. Now, everybody in that city eventually learned his name, but in that moment, most people had no idea who he was. Lucien Armin, billionaire, respected businessman, and quietly, behind closed doors, the leader of one of the most feared organizations in the world. Not that anyone browsing for cupcakes would have guessed it. Without asking, without a single word of warning, Lucien walked up to Beatrice. He gently lifted her chin. He pressed a soft kiss to her forehead, and then, in front of the entire stunned room, he kissed her lips. Then he turned to Nolan, and with a voice that never once rose above calm, he said, "The only woman anyone should envy today is the one you were foolish enough to lose." Silence swallowed the room whole. Now, here's what makes this moment so wild. Nobody understood it. Not one person in that shop could figure out why the most powerful man in the room had just chosen to protect the one woman everybody else was busy laughing at. Nolan's face drained of every drop of color, like the floor had opened up beneath him. Vanessa's confident smile cracked, then crumbled completely. She kept looking back and forth between Lucien and Beatrice, searching desperately for some sign that this was staged, some proof that they planned it just to humiliate her. She found nothing, because there was nothing to find. Lucien just stood there, perfectly composed, one hand resting lightly at his side, and Beatrice stood beside him, frozen, her eyes impossibly wide, more shocked than anybody else in the room. Around them, the whispering started. Somebody quietly reached for their phone. Somebody else started recording, and you can probably guess where those videos ended up. Nolan tried to laugh it off. "Well," he said, "that's certainly dramatic." Lucien looked at him with an expression so calm it was almost scarier than anger. "I believe you've said everything you came here to say." Polite words, unmistakable meaning. "Get out." Vanessa tugged Nolan's sleeve. "We're going." He hesitated, pride wrestling with common sense. But when he noticed customers around him staring with open disapproval, he finally gave up and turned for the door. Neither of them said another word. The bell chimed, and then they were gone. And here's the strange part. The silence they left behind felt heavier than the confrontation itself. Beatrice slowly turned to face Lucien. "You," she whispered. Her voice failed her. She tried again. "You kissed me." "I did," he said simply, "in front of everyone." "Yes, you're completely insane." A few nervous customers actually laughed at that. And then something happened that surprised everybody, including Lucien himself. He smiled. "That is a possibility," he admitted. Beatrice folded her arms tight across her chest. Do you have any idea what you've just done? I prevented cruelty from becoming entertainment. That is not the point. It was to me. She opened her mouth, closed it again, and let out a sigh so deep her shoulders sagged, because nothing about this man made sense. See, she actually knew Lucien, sort of. He was a quiet customer, the one who ordered desserts. Thanked her like he really meant it, and always left generous tips without ever asking for attention. She didn't even know his real name until about 5 minutes ago, and now the entire city had just watched him kiss her. One customer nervously stepped closer. "Excuse me." They both turned. Was that real? Neither of them answered, but the customer just smiled anyway. I hope it was. Within minutes, the videos were everywhere. One clip caught Nolan mocking her. Another caught Vanessa's smug little face. But the 12 seconds that absolutely exploded across the internet were the ones showing Lucien stepping forward. That gentle touch under her chin, the kiss, and those quiet words. The comments multiplied faster than anyone could read them. Some people called it the most romantic thing they'd seen all year. Others swore up and down it was staged. And plenty of people recognized Lucien instantly, which only made the whole thing more unbelievable. Because why on earth would one of the wealthiest, most untouchable men alive publicly defend an ordinary dessert shop owner? By the time the last customer trickled out, Beatrice collapsed into the chair behind the counter and buried her face in her hands. This is a disaster. Lucien was still standing. "I owe you an apology." She looked up, surprised. "I acted without thinking about what it would cost you afterward." "You think?" "Yes." She'd brace herself for excuses. Instead, he just kept going quietly. "I came here intending to buy dessert and leave, the way I always do. But when I heard him ridicule you, when I watched everyone waiting to see if you'd cry, I stopped thinking." He paused, and then almost reluctantly added, "I have seen cruelty in many forms. I refuse to stand still while someone loses their dignity simply because others find it entertaining." Beatrice studied him for a long moment. "You didn't know me well enough to do that." "No. Then why?" And Lucien's answer came without a second of hesitation. Because kindness deserves someone willing to protect it. Neither of them said anything after that. Outside, the notifications kept exploding across the internet. But inside that quiet little shop, Beatrice realized her whole life had just changed, all because one stranger had decided that watching her suffer was simply unacceptable. Now, if she thought the drama was over, she was in for a rude awakening. The very next morning, Beatrice unlocked the shop expecting nothing more exciting than frosting cupcakes. Instead, she found 3 reporters camped outside her door. The youngest one practically pounced. "Miss Holloway, is it true you've been secretly dating Lucien Armand for months?" Another shoved a microphone in her face. "When did your relationship begin? Did he really kiss you because he loves you?" Beatrice blinked twice. No. The reporters exchanged confused glances. No relationship. No secret dating. No romance. No hidden engagement. She sighed. "I baked a lemon tart yesterday. Honestly, that was the most exciting thing that happened before all of this." Unfortunately for her, nobody was interested in the lemon tart. By the time she got the door open, nearly 20 customers had already wandered in. Half of them genuinely wanted dessert. The other half wanted gossip. An elderly woman ordered 6 chocolate eclairs, then leaned in close. "My granddaughter says you're marrying a billionaire." Beatrice nearly dropped the pastry box. "I most certainly am not." "Oh." The woman looked genuinely disappointed. "Well, I'll still take the eclairs." Within an hour, every table was full. People who'd never once set foot in her shop suddenly claimed they'd always wanted to try her desserts. Teenagers snuck selfies by the counter. Business owners stopped in just to catch a glimpse of the woman who'd apparently captured the city's most untouchable man. And Beatrice figured out pretty quickly that these people weren't buying cake. They were buying a story. Every time somebody whispered, she smiled politely. Every time somebody asked about Lucien, she gave the exact same answer. He's simply a customer. Nobody believed her. Not for a second. By noon, social media had invented a dozen entire fake histories for them. Some said they'd met years ago in Paris. Others insisted Lucien secretly funded her business. One especially creative post declared they'd been engaged for months and were planning a lavish wedding in Italy. Beatrice stared at her phone in disbelief. I've never even been to Italy. Her assistant laughed so hard she nearly spilled the icing. Apparently you have now. A customer wandered up. So what's he like? Quiet. No, I mean romantically. I wouldn't know. But he kissed you. Yes. That surprised me too. The customer frowned. You're terrible at celebrity gossip. I own a bakery. Late that afternoon, just as the crowd finally started thinning out, the front door chimed. Beatrice looked up, and there he was. Lucien walked in with the same calm expression he always wore, except nothing about that day was ordinary. Every single customer recognized him instantly. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Somebody nearly dropped a tray, and Lucien just strolled up to the display case like it was any other Tuesday. Good afternoon. Beatrice folded her arms. You got excellent timing. I was hoping the crowd would have cleared out. They're here because of you. I suspected as much. What can I get you? He studied the desserts thoughtfully. I'd like 12 cinnamon pastries. 12. My legal department enjoys cinnamon. She just stared at him. Your legal department. They've had a difficult week. You're bribing lawyers with pastries. I find sugar improves negotiations. And despite herself, she laughed. It just slipped out before she could stop it. Lucien noticed. The smallest smile touched the corner of his mouth. I'll take that as confirmation. While she boxed up the order, another customer cautiously approached him. Mr. Armand, may I ask one question? You may. Are you dating Miss Holloway? Lucien glanced toward Beatrice, who silently mouthed, Don't you dare. He looked back at the customer. I admire her. Technically true. Completely unhelpful. The customer gasped, and within seconds the entire shop was grinning knowingly. Beatrice closed her eyes. You're making this worse. I answered honestly. You answer strategically. There's a difference. There is when the internet exists. He took the pastry boxes, paid, and turned to leave. Then he paused. One more thing. She narrowed her eyes. What? I also need 4 strawberry cheesecakes. You forgot them? No. Then why didn't you order them before? I wish to extend conversation. She stared at him for a good few seconds. That might be the strangest attempt at flirting I've ever witnessed. A faint blush crept across Lucien's cheeks. I wasn't aware I was flirting. You absolutely were. I see. He considered this with total seriousness. I'll try to become better at it. The whole shop broke into quiet laughter. Even Beatrice couldn't stop smiling. And when he finally left, carrying far more dessert than any human being could reasonably eat, a little girl tugged on her apron. Miss, I think the handsome man likes you. Beatrice looked toward the window, where Lucien's car was disappearing into traffic, and smiled helplessly. I think he's just buying too much cake. The child giggled. No, he's finding excuses to come back. And you know what? For the first time since that awful confrontation, Beatrice felt something replace the embarrassment. Not certainty, not romance, just the smallest, warmest little spark of curiosity. Maybe that kiss had changed more than just the internet. Maybe it had changed the way 2 lonely people were starting to look at each other. Over the next 2 weeks, life settled into a strange new rhythm. Every morning brought a fresh wave of curious customers. Every afternoon brought a brand new rumor online. And nearly every single evening, Lucien showed up with some perfectly reasonable excuse to buy an absurd amount of dessert. One day it was for a retirement party. The next, a product launch. Then an employee's birthday. Then somebody's twins had finally come home from the hospital. Then a receptionist had hit 10 years with the company. Beatrice eventually stopped questioning it. She just baked. But one rainy Tuesday, she noticed something odd. Lucien walked in before the shop had even opened. No customers, no reporters, no whispering. Just the smell of fresh butter and vanilla. You forgot to lock the front door, she teased. I was invited. I don't remember inviting you. You said yesterday I could collect my order early. She laughed. I suppose I did. As she set the boxed fruit tarts on the counter, Lucian watched her with that same quiet attention he always carried. Not admiration for her looks, not fascination with her fame. Something gentler than that. Curiosity, almost gratitude. "You remember everyone's names," he observed. She shrugged. "It matters. You served nearly 80 customers yesterday." "I know." "You still remember the elderly gentleman prefers less sugar. He has diabetes. And the little boy with the strawberry allergy. I changed his birthday cake recipe. And the woman collecting cupcakes this afternoon. Her daughter just graduated medical school." Lucian smiled faintly. "You remember everyone?" Beatrice looked genuinely puzzled. "Doesn't everyone?" "No, but they should." She went back to tying ribbons around the boxes, having no idea how deeply that simple answer had just landed on him. Right then, the door opened again, and Nolan walked in. Yes, that Nolan, except this Nolan had 2 professional cameras hanging around his neck. Now here's a twist. It turns out there are actually 2 Nolans in this story, or rather, the X was one thing, but this photographer Nolan was simply an old collaborator who shot her seasonal collections. He stopped short when he noticed Lucian. "Oh, didn't realize I was interrupting." "You aren't," Beatrice assured him. "Nolan helps photograph every seasonal menu." Lucian extended a hand. "Lucian." "Nolan." The handshake was polite enough, though the photographer couldn't quite ignore the quiet intensity behind Lucian's calm eyes. After collecting his order, Lucian got ready to leave, but Beatrice suddenly called after him. "Wait, you always buy dessert for celebrations. What are you celebrating today?" His answer caught her off guard. "A janitor." She blinked. "What?" "He's worked for my company for 32 years. He retires tomorrow, and he deserves excellent cheesecake." She just stared. "That's why you're buying all this." He dislikes speeches. Lucian adjusted the boxes in his arms. "But he enjoys caramel." And then he left. Nolan watched the door close. "He's different." Beatrice nodded slowly. "That's what keeps confusing me." And then, later that afternoon, she made a discovery that changed everything. She was sorting through old invoices in a storage cabinet when she noticed something she'd never caught before. The same customer number, over and over, nearly every single week. Different desserts, different occasions, always paid in full, always generous, always anonymous. She carried the old order forms into the kitchen. Nora, who was customer number 138. Her assistant smiled immediately. "Oh, him. You knew." "Of course. He started coming almost 8 months ago." 8 months. Never missed a week. Beatrice flipped through another folder, her heart starting to pound. "But why did nobody tell me?" Nora laughed. "Because he asked us not to." "He what?" "He said he enjoyed being treated like every other customer." Beatrice lowered herself into a chair. 8 months. Long before Nolan the X had ever come back. Long before the engagement party. Long before that humiliating kiss. Lucian had already been there, quietly sitting by the window, drinking his coffee, thanking the staff, asking about recipes, complimenting new flavors, and slipping out before anyone could make a fuss. And suddenly, dozens of tiny moments she'd brushed aside came flooding back. The man who always asked whether the apprentice baker's exams had gone well. The customer who remembered the cashier's injured wrist. The gentleman who never once complained when an order ran late. The stranger who always thanked everyone before he left. It had been him. All of it. Every time. That evening, Lucian came back for one forgotten pastry. At least, that was the excuse. Beatrice was waiting for him. "You've been lying to me." He looked mildly concerned. "I hope not intentionally. You've been my customer for months." "Yes." "You never told me. You never asked. I thought we met because of the confrontation. I met you because of cinnamon rolls." She couldn't help laughing. That is an absurd sentence. It happens to be true. He hesitated, then went on. "The first morning I came here, no one recognized me. No one expected anything. No one feared me. You asked whether I preferred coffee before we discussed business. We weren't discussing business." "Exactly. And for the first time, Beatrice saw something vulnerable underneath all that polish. In my world, Lucian admitted quietly, every conversation has a purpose. He looked around the little shop. Here, people simply celebrate birthdays. She smiled softly. And anniversaries, and retirements, and first jobs, and surviving hard weeks. He nodded. I had forgotten ordinary happiness could feel so valuable. Neither of them noticed how naturally the silence settled between them. It wasn't awkward anymore. It was peaceful. And Beatrice realized she no longer saw the feared man everyone whispered about. She saw a lonely one who'd spent months searching for the one place where nobody wanted anything from him except to pick a dessert. And Lucian realized something just as unsettling. The woman he'd first admired for her kindness had quietly become the only person on earth with whom he felt entirely himself. Now, by the following month, the frenzy around the kiss had finally started to cool. People still whispered when Lucian visited. They still grinned whenever Beatrice blushed. But the reporters were gone, and life almost felt normal again. Almost, because Nolan, the photographer, had decided her shop needed a complete visual makeover. If your desserts are going viral, he announced one morning, unloading enough equipment to film a movie, then your menu photos should look like works of art. Beatrice laughed. I thought we were photographing cupcakes. We are. Then why do you have 6 lights? Because cupcakes deserve dramatic lighting. Within minutes, the shop turned into organized chaos. Reflectors leaning on chairs, tripods blocking half the kitchen, and Nolan adjusting angles with almost scientific obsession. No, he muttered. Rotate the cheesecake 3 degrees. Beatrice stared. You can see 3 degrees? I can feel 3 degrees. You definitely need a vacation. And at that exact moment, the door opened and Lucian walked in. His usual calm expression lasted about half a second. He looked at the enormous camera, then at Nolan, then at Beatrice, who was laughing harder than he had ever seen her laugh, and something unfamiliar settled in his chest, an emotion he only recognized because he'd watched it wreck negotiations, friendships, and the occasional criminal alliance. Jealousy. He hated it instantly. I hope I'm not interrupting. Beatrice smiled warmly. You're just in time to save me. Don't listen to her. Nolan protested. She secretly enjoys this. I secretly enjoy baking. You spent 20 minutes convincing me that mint leaves should lean left. They look perfectly happy leaning right. Lucian found himself smiling despite the discomfort. What exactly is happening? We're creating the new seasonal catalog, Nolan explained. Lucian nodded like he understood. He absolutely did not. Hold it slightly higher, Nolan told Beatrice. She obeyed. No, lower. She lowered it, turned toward the light. She turned. Beatrice sighed dramatically. If I rotate any further, I'm going to become a lighthouse. And Lucian laughed, out loud, before he could stop himself. Both of them turned to look at him in surprise. You laughed, Beatrice observed. Occasionally. I try not to waste them. Nolan grinned. Perfect. Now stand beside her. Lucian blinked. What? I need a comparison shot for the website. You certainly do not, Beatrice cut in. It'll help demonstrate scale. They're desserts, Nolan. People like people. Lucian hesitated. I've never modeled before. Nolan smiled. I can tell. What followed was 10 solid minutes of comedy. Relax your shoulders. They're relaxed. No, they're negotiating. What does that mean? It means you're standing like you're buying a country. I have bought countries. Nolan stopped. That explains a lot. Beatrice burst out laughing. Lucian watched her double over, wiping tears from her eyes, and the sound filled the whole room with a warmth he hadn't realized he'd been starving for. Then Nolan handed him a reflector. Can you hold this? Lucian took it, held it upside down. No, the silver side. He turned it, other silver side. There are 2. Exactly. Beatrice laughed so hard she had to sit down. The world's most powerful businessman, defeated by aluminum. I've negotiated with heads of state, Lucian replied gravely. No one prepared me for reflective circles. But here's the part that really got him. Later, as they wrapped up, Nolan reached over and gently brushed a streak of flour off Beatrice's cheek. There, you miss a spot. Totally innocent, friendly, natural. Lucian knew that. His face stayed perfectly composed. But inside, he felt a sudden, overwhelming urge to learn absolutely everything about photography before sunrise. And that's exactly what he did. The very next morning, Beatrice nearly dropped her mixing bowl when Lucian walked in carrying 3 enormous shopping bags. What happened? I've purchased equipment. She peeked inside. Professional cameras, studio lights, lenses, a book titled Food Styling for Beginners. Another one, Lighting Made Simple. She stared at him. You bought all of this? Yes. Do you know how to use any of it? No. Why? And with total sincerity, Lucian said, I intend to become surprisingly knowledgeable. She covered her mouth to hide a laugh. This has nothing to do with Nolan, does it? A pause. Perhaps a very small amount. A very small amount. Moderately small. She laughed so hard, she nearly dropped an entire tray of macarons. And for the first time in years, that little shop felt less like the place where she'd been abandoned and more like the place where happiness kept showing up, usually carrying too many pastries. And now, apparently, expensive cameras that nobody knew how to use. Nearly 6 weeks after the kiss, Beatrice really believed the storm had passed. Orders had doubled. Corporate clients were booking months ahead. Families recommended her shop because the desserts were genuinely good, not just because of the gossip. For the first time in years, success felt like something she'd actually earned with her own hands. And then an invitation arrived. The city's annual Children's Hope Charity Gala. One of her dessert displays had been chosen as the centerpiece of the entire evening. She almost said no. Big social events reminded her too much of that engagement party, where Nolan had once decided she wasn't impressive enough to stand beside him. But Nora refused to let her hide. You're not going because of him. I'm not. No. Then why? Because your work deserves to be seen. And that she couldn't argue with. The ballroom shimmered with elegant gowns, tailored suits, and polished smiles. Beatrice smoothed down her simple navy dress, suddenly wondering whether she belonged among all these CEOs and celebrities and politicians. But before the self-doubt could sink its teeth in, a familiar voice greeted her. You look relieved. She turned. Lucian, in a charcoal suit, looking effortlessly distinguished. I am. You expected someone else? I expected reporters. They're outside. She groaned. Wonderful. They'll get bored eventually. They've had nearly 2 months. They're remarkably persistent. She laughed softly. They learn from you. Before he could reply, guests swarmed her dessert display. Children pointed at the tiny pastry village she'd built. Parents photographed every detail. Business owners congratulated her on the craftsmanship. And for once, nobody mentioned the kiss. They talked about chocolate, textures, recipes, creativity. Exactly what she'd always wanted. And then the whole atmosphere shifted, because Vanessa Whitlock walked into the ballroom, elegant as ever, confident as ever. But here's a little truth about life. Confidence built on comparing yourself to other people rarely lasts. She spotted Beatrice immediately, then clocked Lucian standing comfortably at her side, and something dark flickered across her face. Vanessa crossed the room without hesitation, her smile flawless, her eyes anything but. She looked Beatrice up and down. I suppose your little performance worked. Beatrice frowned. I'm sorry. You kissed a billionaire, and suddenly everyone knows your name. Nearby conversations began to slow. People could smell a confrontation. I underestimated you, Vanessa went on. I never planned anything. Oh, please. She folded her arms. You spent years pretending to be harmless. Then the second Nolan moved on, you found someone richer. The room went painfully quiet. Beatrice took a slow breath. I won't argue with you. Because you can't. No, because nothing you just said is true. Vanessa laughed sharply and turned to play to the crowd. She wants everyone to believe the world's most powerful businessman just wandered into a bakery and fell in love. No, Beatrice said steadily. I expect them to believe kindness still exists. Vanessa spun toward the guests, her voice rising. She seduced him because she couldn't handle being rejected. Several uncomfortable glances drifted toward Lucien, and up until this point, he'd stayed silent. Not because he had nothing to say, but because he believed Beatrice deserved the chance to defend herself first. Now, though, he stepped forward. Calm, unhurried, certain. I believe that's enough. Vanessa smiled. I'm only telling the truth. No, you're repeating a story that helps you avoid an uncomfortable reality. And what's that? He looked at Beatrice before he answered. I first became her customer 8 months before that kiss. Murmurs rippled through the room instantly. I visited her shop every week, Lucien continued. I celebrated my employees' birthdays with her cakes. I ordered desserts for retirements, for newborns, for anniversaries, for ordinary people living ordinary joys. He looked around the ballroom. She never knew who I was. She never treated me any differently. She remembered every employee's name, every customer's favorite dessert, every child's allergy. His gaze went back to Vanessa. Long before Nolan ever came back, I had already found something priceless in that little shop. Silence settled over the entire room. The kiss, Lucien said quietly, was never planned. I had no strategy, no arrangement, no expectation. I simply reached a moment where I refused to let cruelty win. He turned to Beatrice, and I would make the exact same decision again, not because she needed rescuing, but because no decent person should stay silent while another is humiliated. And then the applause started. Just one elderly woman near the back at first, then another, and soon the entire ballroom was echoing with warm, genuine appreciation, not for his wealth, not for his power, for simple, ordinary decency. Vanessa's perfect composure finally cracked completely, and without another word, she turned and walked away, realizing far too late that she'd spent months competing against someone who had never been competing at all. Beatrice looked at Lucien, her eyes shining. You didn't have to do that. I know. You keep changing my life. He smiled gently. No, I merely told everyone the truth. And for the first time since Nolan had shattered her confidence all those years ago, Beatrice finally understood something no compliment had ever managed to teach her. Real love doesn't start by comparing one woman to another. It starts by seeing someone's worth long, before anybody else bothers to notice it. Now, you'd think that was a happy ending, right? But here's where the story does something you might not expect. Because after the gala, everything changed for everyone except Beatrice herself. The internet praised her grace. Customers admired her talent. Newspapers even stopped calling her the woman kissed by the Mafia boss and started calling her the pastry artist behind the city's fastest-growing dessert studio. She should have been over the moon. Instead, one uneasy thought refused to leave her alone. Lucien belonged to a world of private jets and billion-dollar deals and whispered power. She belonged to butter, flour, and handwritten recipe cards stained with vanilla. And those two worlds, she told herself, just didn't fit together. One evening, after closing up, she sat alone with a cup of tea, rereading hundreds of thank you notes she collected from customers over the years. Every one of them reminded her exactly why she'd opened the shop, to make ordinary days feel a little more special. And she smiled sadly, thinking, maybe ordinary is exactly where I belong. The next afternoon, Lucien arrived with his usual order, but before he could even speak, Beatrice quietly shook her head. We need to talk. He noticed a change in her face immediately. Of course. She led him to the little table by the window, the very spot where he'd spent so many quiet mornings, the place where he'd first found peace without even realizing it. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Finally, she folded her hands. I think we've been pretending something. Lucien listened. You deserve someone who understands your world. My world, the people you meet, the responsibilities you carry, the danger that follows you. She looked down at her hands. I bake birthday cakes. You carry empires. He answered gently. I never asked you to carry them with me. I know. Then why are you saying goodbye? She smiled, even though it hurt. Because I don't want to become another person you have to protect. And Lucien understood instantly. This wasn't rejection. It was fear, dressed up as generosity. But he respected it. "If distance is what you need," he said, standing slowly, "then I'll give it to you." He didn't argue. He didn't try to convince her. He didn't make impossible promises. He just quietly wished her a good evening, took nothing with him, and walked out, carrying only the silence between them. And the weeks that followed were quiet. Customers kept coming. Business kept growing. Life kept moving. But every single afternoon, right around 4 o'clock, Beatrice caught herself glancing toward the door before reminding herself there was no reason to expect anyone anymore. And Lucien? He filled his days with meetings across 3 continents. Boardrooms, contracts, security briefings. People obeyed his every word. But when evening came, all those victories felt strangely hollow. Eventually, his assistant asked a question no one else dared to. "Sir, should I cancel the standing dessert order?" Lucien looked at the untouched box sitting on his desk. "No, you aren't eating them." "I know. Then why keep ordering?" He smiled faintly. "Because hope occasionally requires poor financial decisions." 3 more weeks passed. And then, one quiet Saturday morning, the bell above the bakery door rang again. Beatrice looked up out of habit. And there he was. No tailored gift box. No flowers. No jewelry. Just a small white pastry box, held carefully in both hands. She stared. "I didn't make that." "No." He walked to the counter. "You made it 8 months ago." Confusion crossed her face. "I don't understand." He opened the box, and inside sat a simple honey almond tart. Nothing fancy, nothing trendy, just a humble little dessert she'd once been experimenting with before quietly pulling it off the menu. "I kept the recipe card," Lucien explained. "You wrote a note on the back." She leaned closer, and there, in her own handwriting, were the words, "Ordinary recipes become unforgettable when shared with the right people." She had completely forgotten writing that. He never had. "I asked my pastry chef to recreate exactly." "You remembered this?" "I remember the day." His voice softened. "It was my 3rd visit. You apologized because the crust wasn't perfect. And I told you it tasted like home." She felt tears gathering. "I remember." Lucien stepped closer. "I've spent most of my life surrounded by extraordinary things. Extraordinary wealth. Extraordinary influence. Extraordinary fear." He smiled gently. "But every single time I walked into this shop, I left feeling like an ordinary man." His eyes never left hers. "I didn't fall in love because I kissed you. I kissed you because, without even realizing it, I had already spent months falling in love." He laughed quietly at himself. It happened one birthday cake, one retirement cheesecake, one conversation, one cup of coffee at a time. No grand speeches, no dramatic decorations, just quiet honesty filling that little bakery. Beatrice finally whispered, "I was afraid I'd never fit into your world." Lucien slowly shook his head. "You never needed to. My happiest world has always been yours." She looked around the tiny shop, the flour-dusted counter, the handwritten menus, the familiar window, the place where she had rebuilt herself after heartbreak. Then back at the man who had never once tried to change any of it. And with tears shining in her eyes, she reached across the counter and gently took his hand. This time, neither of them needed the courage that comes from a reckless impulse, only the quiet certainty that love had been growing there all along, long before either of them found the words for it. Months later, that little dessert studio didn't need a viral story to bring people in anymore. They came because the pastries were genuinely exceptional, because every cake carried somebody's memory, because every single customer walked out feeling noticed. Corporate orders filled the weekdays. Birthday bookings filled the weekends. Families drove across the whole city just to taste desserts they'd only seen online. Everything Beatrice had ever dreamed was finally happening, and not because a wealthy man had rescued her, but because her talent had finally been seen. And Lucien kept his promise. He never offered to buy the bakery, never suggested turning it into some luxury franchise, never invested a single dollar. And whenever people asked him why, his answer was always the same. She built this with her own hands. It belongs to her. And that simple respect meant more to Beatrice than any extravagant gift ever could have. One quiet Saturday, the shop was buzzing with laughter, regulars enjoying their coffee and desserts. A young couple recognized Lucien, sitting by the familiar window. The husband approached with an embarrassed smile. "Mr. Armand, may I ask something?" Lucien closed the book he'd been reading. "Of course. My wife and I have argued about this for months." His wife laughed. "He thinks the famous kiss was planned. I say it wasn't." Several nearby customers smiled, already knowing the answer. Lucien glanced toward the kitchen, where Beatrice was decorating a birthday cake. She caught everyone looking at him and raised an amused eyebrow. He smiled before he answered. "No." The couple leaned in. "The kiss surprised me, too," Lucien said. A ripple of laughter spread through the cafe. And then, with quiet honesty, he added, "It was simply the first honest thing my heart did before my mind could stop it." And at that exact moment, Beatrice walked over carrying 2 slices of honey almond tart, the very dessert that had quietly connected their hearts long before either of them understood why. She set one plate in front of him. "You still order this every week." "I always will, even though it's no longer on the menu." He smiled. Some recipes deserve to stay personal. She laughed, shaking her head with that same warmth that had once helped a lonely stranger forget the weight of his own name. Around them, the conversations picked back up. Children laughing over cupcakes, an elderly couple sharing a slice of cheesecake, someone celebrating a promotion, a family welcoming a newborn with a custom cake. Ordinary moments, the exact moments Lucien had once believed were too small to matter. And now he understood they were life's greatest treasures. Beatrice slipped her hand into his beneath the table. No cameras captured it. No reporters waited outside. No applause followed. This time, they didn't need an audience. The humiliation that was meant to break her had become nothing more than a distant memory. What lasted was something far stronger. A woman who rediscovered her own worth. A man who found peace in the last place he expected it. And a love that began not with power, but with one simple decision: to protect another person's dignity when everyone else stayed silent. So here's the question I want to leave you with. How many extraordinary people are walking around, quietly hoping to be treated like an ordinary one? And how many ordinary moments are we rushing past, without realizing they're the ones that actually matter? Because in the end, Lucien didn't fall for Beatrice's beauty or her fame. He fell for the way she made everyone feel seen. And maybe that's the real lesson here. Kindness isn't small. Kindness isn't ordinary. Kindness is the rarest, most powerful thing there is. If this story warmed your heart even a little, do me a quick favor and hit that like button. It genuinely helps more than you know. Subscribe if you want more stories like this one, because I got plenty more coming. And drop a comment down below and tell me, did you think that kiss was planned, or did his heart just get there first? I read every single one. I'll see you in the next story.